I caught it in a stupid place. A driveway slick with slugs after rain, the sodium street lamp doing that sickly buzz, and my wife's silhouette breathing at the upstairs window like she owned the house and every thought I'd ever had. I stood by the car door with keys biting my palm and felt my own skull clench like there were two sets of hands on the steering wheel of me. That's when a missing piece clicked. Not a puzzle piece. More like a tooth. Something bit down. It took me months to hear it. I'm not easing you into this. I'm terrified the baby's going to show up any day now, and I'm not ready for what happens the minute he does. I keep telling myself I'm not crazy, that there's a way to explain all of it with the boring stuff, grief, fatigue, hormones, whatever, but that's like throwing tissues at a flood. If you think the whole story's about sleazy family drama, leave. That's not the worst thing in here. The worst thing was a smile I grew up trusting. I didn't have a horror movie childhood. Novid, Novrusis. My mother raised me by herself in a crooked brick house not far from the Pendle Hills. She never shouted. She could cut you without raising her voice, though. She had a hobby she called walking, but it looked like disappearing into the trees at midnight and coming back plastered with leaf muck and damp bark and bands of raw red on her shins like she'd threaded herself through hedges thinner than a comb. She washed in the sink, steam fogging the kitchen window. The water would run rust-colored. Fox, she'd say if I stared. Bird. If I pushed, she'd say, "You're not hungry enough, Liam." And it sounded like I'd let her down in a way that had nothing to do with appetite. She studied the Pendle witches like other people follow football. She'd correct anyone who said witches, plural. There was only ever one, she'd say. And for a second the light would shift in the room like a cloud had crossed the sun, and you could feel it in your eardrums, that pressure you get before slow thunder. No hexes at home. No altars. Just library books with frayed spines, post-it notes on the kettle, and a wall calendar with days ringed in a hard black hand that left dots in the paper. If she frightened me, it wasn't because she hit me. It was because she looked at me like I was a cake that hadn't risen. I left. Uni, a flat with ceilings that lilted in summer and sighed in winter. I met Millie in a queue for battered sausage, and we kissed behind the library, and we stuck the way some people do. Got degrees, got jobs, got an actual sofa that didn't smell like someone else's breath. I call my mother every Sunday while stirring onions. She asked about money and weather, and once, when I said we were thinking of trying for a baby, she said, "We'll see," and I thought she was warning me about sleeplessness or broken glass, but she was talking about something else. Then last year the phone rang, and a neighbor I barely remembered told me they'd found my mother wandering the high street with no clothes and streaked with what the officers called animal blood, because that's the report they write when it's not human, even if their mouths go tight when they say it. 36 hours later, a doctor with warm hands and a tea-stained tie told us it was dementia, sudden onset, likely a small stroke. These things happen very quickly sometimes, he said, and I wanted to shove my fist in his mouth to stop the words. I could make a whole story about those first weeks. Wrangling forms, smelling disinfectant until it followed me into sleep, arguing with nurses about whether mom liked tea dark or pale, but it would just be white noise under what I'm saying now. The important part is, I labeled her slippers. I brought in quilts. I watched the light fade out of her like someone slowly turning a dimmer. She stopped using my name. She forgot how to hold a spoon. I held the spoon. Meanwhile, back home, the test strip bloomed a second pink line. Millie lifted it like a flag. We laughed. I cried. We ate toast in the hall because neither of us could stand up. Life can hold two opposite truths without tearing: grief and joy. You can think your heart is ripping and still go by tiny socks. That's the knife of it. For months, I blamed every weird thing on pregnancy. Anything she muttered in the middle of the night, I told myself was sleep talking. Now I hear the words with my mother's mouth speaking through them. He'll be so hungry. Nearly time to climb. Not long until you replace Papa. That last one got under my nails because it sounded mean in a way Millie could be, but rarely was. I remember saying, "Replace me with what? Exactly?" And she blinked then smiled too smooth. "Replace you as the baby," she said, and patted my cheek like I was 6. I should have listened when the old bits of my life started popping up like weeds. A note fell from the Pendle library book I'd fetched from Mum's loft to see if it made her eyes light. Hospital staff found it in her pocket and taped it into her chart. Yellow paper, the panel kind they sell in bundles, curling at the corners. It said, in my mother's handwriting, careful and looping. Rule 1, no mirrors on the night of a new thing. Rule 2, dress the boy in wool. Not cotton, not nylon. Wool soaks and remembers. Rule 3, if you hear hooves, don't look at the legs. Rule 4, be polite to who knocks after midnight. Rule 5, no glass in the nursery. The nurse laughed and called it her little spell list. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and tucked the page back in. 2 of those rules felt like pure nonsense. 1 felt old country. 1 felt harmless. 1 felt like a dare I didn't ever want to be dared to take. I didn't throw the note away. I stuck it to our fridge with a holiday magnet shaped like a cow, because that's what you do when you want to pretend you're not scared. You make a joke and put it under a cow. The care home printed an incident report too, the practical kind with clean lines and boxes for agitation, falls, wandering. It described Mum's first night like any accident. Patient attempted to exit via fire door. Patient resisted showering. Patient vocalized about the old one behind the birches. I took that home and folded it into the book I was reading and then forgot I'd done that until the night it slid out and landed face up on the kitchen floor like a dead fish. The paragraph about the old one caught my eye again. The day of the week was circled in biro, Monday, under that someone else had written in smaller script. In pencil, the kind of note you make when you don't want to be seen writing it. She keeps saying there is only one witch wears all the faces. I know I sound like a person pulling strings on a corkboard to make a map of the world. I'm not proud of how long it took me. The truth is sometimes quiet and ugly and smells like bleach. 2 months ago, Millie asked me to flip the hallway mirror. Bad luck, she said, half laughing, to let him see himself before he's here. We'd never had that superstition. It wasn't our culture. I flipped it anyway, because the way she said it made my scalp prickle. I went upstairs quietly and found a quarter of a nursery glass wrapped under the cot sheet, like she'd already been obeying Rule 5 without reading it. I told myself I was being weird, but my body didn't believe me. And then last night, when it split, we'd gone at the same time we always did, the hour when the care home thins out and the TVs get too loud. I held my mother's hand. It was as light as dry paper. Her nails were neat. She was gone. She'd been gone all week, eyes sliding off my face like oil off water. I said her name anyway. I put a slice of Battenberg on a plate like that might anchor her soul back in her body via sugar. She turned her mouth toward me and spoke in my name. Liam. She said it in this low, tight way only she does when she needs me to not be stupid. It made the hairs on my arm stand up like static. I wheeled my chair closer and said, "Hi, Mom. I brought." And that was when she interrupted, not with a word, but with her whole face. Terror, like she was looking at a dog with human teeth. "Millie," she said, and then, "It's me," and I went all warm in my cheeks because it sounded like either a cruel joke or a symptom, and I did not want to be the bad guy who corrected a dying woman. I nodded and lied, and my lie tasted like pennies. She tightened her grip. 2008, she said. Behind the graduation hall. Dumpster. You called it a good luck fuck, and then you couldn't get your tassel to sit right. She laughed once, short. It stuck in your hair, like a fishhook. Her eyes went cloudy mid-sentence like a pond when the wind hits it, and she hissed, "Who are you, sir?" and tried to shove me out of the room. I stumbled over the wheelchair footrest and nearly went down. I caught myself on a table with a bowl of those little wrapped mints nobody likes. That's how fast the air changed in me. I left. I didn't sign out. I didn't take the cake. I let the door shut on the nurse, saying, "Everything all right?" And I lied with a thumbs up like a kid. In the car, I didn't cry. I did the opposite of cry. I got very calm the way people get right before avalanches hit. The engine sound mixed with the sound in my head. That night, at 4 years old, when I woke to footfall in the hall and my mother's low, furious whisper. "He isn't what you promised," she said. "He's not hungry. Not yet. I did the circle. I did the bone milk. He won't take." Then this softer, sliding reply. Not language so much as a temperature. It said something that made her important. I could hear that like the voice was patting her. "No," she said, "for years is too long. Choose him. Choose him." The floorboards creaked. Something else breathed. The next morning she made pancakes and said I'd had a nightmare. She picked a splinter out of my heel with a needle and hummed. I drove home fast enough to make the road hum like a wine glass. The upstairs light was on. A shadow moved. And here's the thing you should know about the moment you realize your wife isn't the person looking out the bedroom window you want them to be. You will wring yourself into knots to make that be true. You will swallow whatever lie you have to, the way kids swallow coins. I went in the front door ready to nod and smile and pretend the care home hadn't happened. She didn't let me. She stood in the hall with her hand on her belly and said, "Lily," and my stomach tried to fold in half. "Don't call me that," I said, because that was the only sentence I had. "Please don't ever call me that." The grin she gave me was the one my mother used to put on for neighbors. When little Liam arrives, she said, same voice, same rhythm. "This gets simple. You're tired, aren't you? Aren't you tired of picking the wrong shape?" "What are you talking about?" I said, but my mouth already knew, and my tongue rolled the words like it didn't want to swallow them. Is my mother inside my wife? "Hungry," she said softly. "He'll be very hungry." She stepped closer. I stepped back. Her eyes flickered, and it wasn't a trick of light. It was like something inside her blinked. That's when I saw the ripple. Not a pregnancy kick. Something under the skin that moved side to side like a fish swiping in shallow water. I made a noise like someone had taken my lung in their fist. She pushed me with 2 fingers. I went down fast and stupid and landed hard enough to see white. She could have rushed me. She didn't. She watched me scuttle backwards like a beetle that's tipped over and flipped itself. "You don't want to climb, do you?" she said. "My poor soft boy." She said it like she'd said, "Don't eat the berries" when I was 5. She reached out and gripped my jaw, and I felt the plural in her hand. Hands on top of hands. "Let her in. You know her. She's been knocking a long time." I choked on a "who," but the word came out as a cough. She leaned down so close I could smell salt and something else faint and metallic, like she had a pocket full of keys. "The old one," she said, and the syllables didn't fit right in her mouth, like they were nicking the inside. "She's in you already. Just open." I whined. I'm not proud. I scrabbled at the doormat like a cartoon criminal and got my feet under me in time to lurch for the door. She didn't stop me. She let me bang into the car like I'd never used hands before. I hit the unlock as if it would save me from physics and gods. When I yanked the door, the window threw back a reflection I didn't recognize, my face cut into angles by the porch light. In that glass, she was suddenly behind me. No footsteps, no breath. Millie's chin right over my shoulder. I flinched and tasted bile as her nails tapped the hollow under my ear, a sketch artist checking the shape. "You ate your father," she said conversationally. "You don't even remember. That was the first bite the old one wanted, and you did it without thinking. A baby takes. That's all. Fuck you," I said to the window. It fogged with my breath, and the words erased themselves. "I never had a father," I added, smaller to the glass. She smiled at our 2 faint faces. "You did," she said. "For an hour or 2. She squeezed a soft place by my jaw, and I yelped. "Do you want to be the stag or the fawn? I asked you when you were little." You waddled to the fridge and pointed at your own reflection and drooled. She laughed. "You never were hungry enough, were you?" That's when the gush came. The sound was a slap on tile. She bent double. Water ran dark between her legs. She looked up with such radiant relief that for one awful second, I was the one who smiled back. Then I slammed the car door and crawled across the passenger seat into the driver's like a drunk in a boat. I hit the lock and heard the clunk and dared to breathe. She stood outside laughing and rubbing her belly like an actor in a sitcom. I backed out too fast and nearly took the bin with me. She didn't chase. She did that thing people do in films, watching the car leave like they have all the time in the world. I drove until the road stopped being familiar, and then I kept driving. I know what this sounds like. Believez-moi, Ido. I told myself I was just sick from stress. I replayed all the weird lines and tried to recut them into something safe. I got as far as the petrol station near the motorway. Before panic, let me take my foot off the accelerator. I sat with the engine ticking and thought about the rules on the fridge. Wool, no mirrors, polite to midnight knocking, no glass in the nursery. Hooves, the pump number flashed on the till. The kid at the counter said, "You all right, mate?" And I said, "New baby," because that's a sentence you can say in any room to get past a guard. He nodded and didn't make me make eye contact. I bought water and a packet of those mints like the ones at the home because I wanted something that tasted like I was still in one version of reality. I sat in the car park and read the incident report again. The line about the old one behind the birches had smudged where my thumb pressed it. Underneath, in tiny pencil, someone had written, "Refuses room with mirror. Bites glass." I drove again. I didn't have anywhere to go that would be safe. I didn't know what safe was now. I pulled into a lay-by that smelt like hot brakes and piss and called the care home and asked for the night nurse, the one with the French plate and the sleeve of swallow tattoos. When she came to the phone, she said my name politely and then said, "Everything okay?" in a tone that told me it wasn't. I told her my mother had been lucid and she said, "They do that." And I said, "She said she was my wife." And she went quiet for a second and then said, "She knows too much about you, doesn't she?" And I said nothing because what if my silence meant yes? And she said, softer, "Sometimes the remembering hurts." I didn't tell the nurse my wife had used my childhood name, or that she called the baby Little Liam in the way my mother had once said Little Bird when I swallowed a coin. I didn't tell her about the hooves I'd heard on the landing as a child, the odd triple beat that still makes me want to crawl under furniture. I didn't tell her I'd grown up in a house where the fridge had wool written on a post-it like that was a pantry item. I hung up. I watched the dark like a dog watches a door. At some point, the sky lightened and the world was just the world again, ugly and practical. I went to the chemist when it opened and bought pads and cotton and alcohol wipes because I couldn't buy a new sole. And when the woman at the till said due date, I felt myself do the thing, hand to belly smile, and heard myself say any day now and wanted to hit the glass until the glass hit back. I took the long road home, the one that slips past the birch stand. The bark looked like peeled skin. I couldn't stop seeing my mother moving into those trees like she was being inhaled. When I reached the lane, the bin I'd clipped lay on its side in a neat stink. The front door was ajar like a mouth that can't close because something is wedged in it. I stood on the mat and thought about the rules. Wool, mirrors, hooves, politeness, glass. I thought about how rule for look nice, the way poison sometimes looks like wine. Be polite to who knocks after midnight. I had a sudden, ridiculous thought. What if that one mattered most? I went in. The hall smelled of iron and something sweet. Millie, was in the kitchen with a towel between her legs and that grin on. "You ran," she said. "When it gets hard, you always run." I opened my mouth to inform her of all the hard things I'd not run from, and what came out was, "What did you do?" in a voice I didn't know I had. She tilted her head like a bird. "I kept the promise," she said. "You wouldn't. You were supposed to eat me when you were small. That's what they do when they're hungry enough. But someone fed you patience and toys. Someone made the room too bright. I waited years for you to show your teeth. I fed you bones and broth. You sung. I took you walking and pointed you at the trees. You stayed polite. I was 4, I said. I was 4. She raised a hand as if swatting a fly. There are 4-year-olds who could swallow cities. The towel darkened. She glanced at the clock. We're late. For what? I said. My mouth wouldn't stop. It was like a tap left on by someone else. For who to show up? She looked right at me, and for a split second, I saw my mother. The woman who'd carried me home asleep from a bus and leaned her face into my hair as if smell could print memory. Then something inside her blinked again. "For the knocking," she said. "For your lesson in manners." I heard it before she finished the sentence. On the front door. Not a bang. Not the tidy 3 that makes you think neighbor. A long, low pull like knuckles dragged across wood. I nearly laughed because I've forgotten how my body did that. How close to laughter fear lies. "Don't," I said without knowing what I meant. She brushed past me, not even looking, as if all this talking had been the preamble to something real. She pulled the door open and stepped back with her head ducked like she was greeting a vicar. "Good evening," she said, though it was broken morning and everything smelled like wet wool and metal. "You're welcome." I didn't see anyone at first. Then my eyes adjusted to the shade, and there it was, the shape of a thing I tried not to name since the day I saw it standing at the bottom of the garden wearing my father's jacket. Not hooves. The sound had lied. Not hooves. It had legs that didn't belong to any way of walking I know. Long as a room, jointed wrong, tapping the floorboards, making music from the house itself. The face, if that's what it was a bright blank, a piece of night folded in on itself. I wanted to apologize for looking. I wanted to say please. I wanted to say I'm full. Don't look at the legs, my mother who wasn't said. Rule 3. She gave me a smile like we were in on a joke together and turned her head like a hostess to show. I was behind her, spoils on a platter. And that was when something inside me that hadn't ever been brave did something like bravery. I stepped between them. I don't know why. Maybe because I hate being volunteered. Polite, I said, because language was what I had. We're supposed to be polite. The thing that wasn't in the doorway tilted. The front room went cold. "Good morning," I said because I couldn't help it. Pain slid behind my eyes like a coin under a skin. I was a kid again with a splinter in my heel and my mother humming while she dug. "Congratulations," I said to the empty, to the space, to the bright blank. "We're expecting." My voice wobbled, but I got the words out. The air did a small ripple, like heat over road. The thing tasted the sentence as if it were soup. It didn't step in. It didn't step away. It pressed itself into the edges of the door and became the frame. Millie's, my mother's, hands went to the towel again. She made a rough sound. "Time," she said, and looked impatient, the way she did when I took too long to put on socks as a child. "You're supposed to let it in." I stared at the note on the fridge because I couldn't look at the doorway or at her belly or at anything that belonged to any world. Be polite to who knocks after midnight. I've been stupid to think it meant open the door. Maybe it meant exactly the opposite. Polite like the old stories, where you don't invite vampires and you never say thanks to fairies because that makes you theirs. Polite like acknowledgement without hospitality. "Thank you for coming," I said to the emptiness that wore the door. "We're not receiving visitors." The pain got worse. A warm trickle ran from my nose over my lip. Mum's, Millie's, face went flat with fury. "Don't you dare," she said in a voice I hadn't heard since I was 5 and stuck scissors in a socket. "Don't you dare make me small." "I'm not," I said, and my teeth clicked with the tremor in me. "I'm saying not yet. There are rules." I held up the note like it was a police badge. The thing in the doorway tilted again. The house popped softly like hot metal cooling. The front step went quiet. After a long, crackling moment, the pressure lifted. Not away, just up, like something pressing off the roof to give itself room to rise. My mother swore like a woman hitting a thumb with a hammer. She rounded on me with a look that could crack varnish. "You puerile little herbivore," she said and slapped me. Not hard. Hard enough that my brain didn't catch for a second, and I had time to think about the curve of her thumbnail. "You had one job. Eat. Get out of my wife," I said before I could stop it. Saying it out loud made it ridiculous and real at once. She rolled her eyes in a way that would have been comic if there'd been anything human left in it. "Your wife isn't here," she said, and for a fraction of a second her expression shifted like a ripple under a duckweed pond, and something like grief showed. "Not usually," she added. and that ruined it. She stepped away as if bored of a trick that hadn't dazzled. "Help me upstairs," she commanded. And when I didn't move, she groaned and took the banister herself. One hand on her belly like a pregnant woman in any world, breathing and counting. I followed because not following felt like leaving a pan on the stove. In the bedroom, Millie's bag was packed in the smug way bags are when women have done the sensible thing and men have not. I grabbed it because that felt like something I could do without getting any more blood on my hands. She laughed. "You think a hospital owns this?" She put her palms on a mattress and breathed in force. I stood there useless as furniture. "Wool," she said. "We need wool." It took me a second to remember. I yanked the cupboard and pulled out the old green blanket my mother had saved from a charity shop. I can hear her voice. "£2? Robbery." And I spread it on the bed, and my hands shook like there was music in them. "Good boy," she said, and that ruined the feeling of being useful. Her waters kept running, and the room stank like a fairy. I opened the window because my body demanded air that hadn't been in someone else first. Out in the yard, the birches held their white breath. On the wall above the changing table, the photo frames shone with nothing because we hadn't filled them yet. No glass in the nursery, the rule said, and for once I obeyed something before it told me why. The room felt softer without the shine. Between contractions, she was chatty. "That's my mother for you." She gossiped with the beast behind the trees. She gossiped in the bath. She gossiped while making lists. "It won't hurt if you do it right," she said. "If you chew the gristle first, the rest slides." I said, "Stop." And she shook her head like a teacher with a tender idiot. "You think I like being meat," she said. "You think I didn't want to live in one piece? You think I got off on walking out to the trees and asking to be eaten?" She smiled sadly, genuinely, the way my mother did when neighbor's cat died. "I wanted to be the knife," she said. "But not everyone gets their want. Someone had to set the table." She bore down. She cracked noise out of the room. I fetched towels and boiled water because people do that in stories, and it gave me something to hold. When it got bad, she snapped, "Don't look at the legs," at nothing, and then no mirrors, as if she could hear the world trying to split. Her face loosened. I saw my wife for breath. She looked at me like she was coming up from 60 feet down. "Don't let her," she said, dry as dust, words like twigs in a bucket. "Don't let her eat me. Don't let me." And then she went under, and the other one rolled back in like cold tide. I said her name until I hated the sound of it. "Millie, Millie." She panted and snarled at me to count. I counted. She said, "Shut up," and I shut up. Between the swells, she told me again how I'd taken my father in the first hour like milk, and I told her to choke on her own spit, and she said, "Conversational, such language," and I slapped my own cheek so I wouldn't slap hers. I wanted to be good. I wanted to be cruel. I don't know how to tell you about the birth without making us both leave the room. It was blood and shit and sweat and human fury. It was the oldest story with a second mouth under it making a new version. When the crown showed, I saw hair that wasn't black like Millie's or brown like mine. It was pale as wet straw. I thought of the blanket. Wool soaks and remembers. I reached without meaning to, and my mother snarled, "Don't touch unless you'll keep." Another contraction crushed the air. A sound came out of her that had no softening in it. The head slid. The shoulders stalled. She panted, hissed, pushed like hate, and then he was there. Not crying, looking right at me with eyes that weren't newborn eyes. People say babies can't focus. Those eyes focused like a knife. He opened his mouth. Little perfect, rosebud human mouth. Behind it, deeper, I saw something else like a second throat, like someone had drilled another hole for feeding. I screamed, yes. I did, quietly. A controlled scream. The kind you let die in back teeth. "Hungry," my mother said, delighted. She lunged to put him to her breast, and I moved on reflex. I snatched him. I wrapped him in the wool. My wrists tingled where he touched. My arms went colder than any air in the room. My mother laughed. "Now look," she said. "Now you look like you want to be chosen." She shoved up on her elbows, reaching. I stepped back, and my heel hit the stippled bin, and it went over with a noise like a pool cue breaking. She crawled toward me. Not walked, crawled, her knees wrenching like she'd forgotten legs. I saw the old shape of her in that, the way she used to get down to peer under furniture for lost earrings. It made me disgusted with how much tenderness I still had for her. "I won't," I said. He blinked up at me. He smelled like copper wires after rain. "I won't." I wanted to say, "I won't let you be meat." I wanted to say, "I won't be what you wanted." I said them both sideways. I used my mouth like it was a door with locks. "He'll starve," she said softly. "Don't you dare starve him." She sounded like herself then. For 2 seconds. "Don't you hurt him because you don't want to be what you are." Then she lunged again, and this time there wasn't any person in it. She bared her teeth. Not for biting, just to show me how many she had. I bolted. Down the stairs, so fast my socks slid. The baby made this little sound, not a cry, more like a tuning fork. The air vibrated around it. I nearly tripped over the notes on the hall table, appointment cards, a leaflet about breastfeeding, the incident report from the home. It fell open on the passage where someone had written "bites glass." The words looked old. They looked like they belonged to my house. I made it to the garden. The birches breathed. The shade was gray and green and damp. I clutched him, and my whole body went to welder's gloves. That's how it felt, like I was holding something hot I couldn't drop. Behind me, she came, a half-crawl, half-run that I will have nightmares about until I meet. The thing at the door was gone, or it had moved. The house looked emptier for it, as if a picture had fallen and left a rectangle of clean paint. "Let me feed him," she panted. "You can watch. You can stand there and make faces and tell yourself you're a good man. But let me feed him." Her voice was back to the friend voice, the one that had taught me to tie my shoes. I stared at the trees. Rule 3. If you hear hooves, don't look at the legs. I didn't hear anything. I looked down at the baby and said, without deciding to, "You don't have to be hungry." He blinked. The old one inside me stretched, long as a yawn, pressing my ribs, and whispered how silly it was to say that. The world eats and is eaten. That's how any of this works. Why are you so afraid of the name of it? You've been tasting it since before you had teeth. I backed toward the car. Millie, my mother, was fast for someone wrecked. She grabbed my ankle and I kicked her wrist and hated myself for not apologizing. I jammed the key in the lock because my hands had gone stupid again, and the fob decides to die only when you need it. The baby went very still in my arms like a fox cub hiding. He didn't make a sound. I got us in. I slammed the door. She didn't pull at the handle. She pressed her forehead to the glass, and it made a squeak like a marker on a whiteboard. "My boy," she said, and for a second I didn't know if she meant me or him. And then it didn't matter because both were true. "You were supposed to eat me," she whispered. "It would have been so clean." I thought of a pot noodle and laughed out loud because my brain is disgusting. Then I started the engine and I reversed, and she stepped back because even gods have to move for cars sometimes. And I went, and she watched us go. She didn't chase. She raised a hand in a slow knot wave like a person at a train window. And I remember doing that with her when I was 8, leaving her for the first time to go on a school trip, pressed palms to glass, my breath making a cloudy circle that fitted hers. I almost stopped. I didn't. I drove. The baby was quiet. He stared at my neck in a mirror like he could see through to whatever twitchy thing lived in there. The road became a string I tugged. I thought of the fridge note, and I promised him and myself I'd follow the ones that could still do anything. Wool. Politeness without invitation. Don't look at legs. No glass. It is, I guess, important to tell you that none of this gets tied up. There isn't a clever trick at the end where I trap my mother in a jar. The truth is looser. I'm sending this because maybe saying it out loud keeps us in the smaller world a little longer. The world where cars and petrol stations and nurses exist and babies are just babies. I'm sending this because I used to be slow to notice and now I can't stop seeing. If you want more details, I can give you the small things that keep a story honest. My mother chewed ice when she quit smoking and cracked a molar and didn't fix it. Millie hides the good chocolate behind the oats. The care home radio is always tuned to a station that plays Brown Eyed Girl twice a day. The shade under birch leaves is colder than it ought to be. You can hear the difference between a fox and anything else in how they step on gravel. I haven't slept properly in 4 months, and I keep waking because I think a hoof is scraping the floor. Then I remember, not hooves. The other sound. There are things I don't know. I don't know where Millie is when it's not her face I'm looking at. I don't know how long my mother had been practicing. I don't know when exactly the wheel turned and who spun it. I don't know what the old one truly wants beyond hunger dressed up as religion. I don't know if you can starve God. I only know where the rules get you, which is not safety so much as delay. I'm at a service station now, the kind with a Costa that smells like sugar and burnt milk. I've parked at the far edge where Lori's sleep. The baby is wrapped like a lamb in the green wool, and his eyes keep slipping past me to the window, to the bit of world that moves. He doesn't cry. He licks his lips in his sleep. When the air conditioner kicks on, the fine hairs on his head lift, and I see a pattern in the swirl that makes my stomach go weird. It looks like a set of rings. Not charming. Geological. He snuffles. I say no, out loud to nothing. The woman in the pickup 2 slots over glances and then looks away because people look away from men talking to nobody. I should call someone. The police. A priest. The doctor who said these things happen fast. I should drive to the hospital and throw us both at the mercy of fluorescent lights. I should run into the trees right now and hand him to the first thing that moves and say, if you want to take it, take me with it, because that feels on the thinnest level honest. I am writing instead because I'm good at the trivial bravery of words. Maybe you're shouting at me to go home. Maybe you're shouting at me to never go home. You should know I won't be the one choosing. She let me drive away because she thinks prayers work even when you don't say them. Her prayer is the oldest. Let the child be more than the parent. Let do what we couldn't. Let eat. Mine is clumsier. I don't believe in saints. I don't believe in salt lines. I believe in how my mother used to hold my head when I was sick and the way Millie says my name when she wants me in a room. I believe in wool. I believe in not offering a chair to something that knocks after midnight. I believe in counting out loud during contractions until your voice breaks. I believe in closing your eyes when you hear hooves. I believe in how small a body can be and still fill an entire day. I'm going to drive again, not toward anywhere, away from a door. Soon, she'll find me. Of course she will. Witches always find their boys. When she does, I'll try one last time to be rude in the right way. I'll hold him tighter and I'll say, no. I'll stand in front of whatever shape she wears and I'll tell her the truth I'm allowed to choose. I will not eat you and he will not eat me. I don't know if that matters. The world answers to hunger, not assertion. But I'm saying it anyway, because sometimes the difference between a prayer and a plan is whether you move your feet. If you're hearing this and you feel the urge to leave your door open, don't. If a baby looks at you like he knows your PIN, look back, but remember you don't have to let anything in just because it knows your name. Keep one in the house. Turn the mirrors around on the night of a new thing. If you hear hooves, shut your eyes and count. If someone knocks after midnight, be polite with your mouth and mean with your door. Take the glass out of the nursery and leave the frames empty for a while, because sometimes that's what keeping looks like, bare space where a picture should go. I can't fix what I was too slow to see. I can only say it straight. My mother wore my wife like a coat and told me to devour her. She said I ate my father. She said the fawn climbs when it eats the doe and the stag. She said the old one lives in my ribs like a breath I never let out. She might be right. She might have always been right. She might have dragged me into a forest and wrote rules for me on a pad and circled Mondays because those were the days the door was thinner. I bought the wool wrap twice now. He's warm. His mouth opens in his sleep like a goldfish's. Instinct makes my thumb go to that tiny soft place by his jaw. I stop myself. I'm not feeding my hunger anymore. I'm going to praise something that isn't elegant. I'm going to say in a car that smells like petrol and mince and iron. If anyone's listening who isn't hungry, hear me. Let it be small. Let him be the kind of boy who drops crumbs for birds and grows up to fix taps. Let him be bored. Let him be rude to myths. If he must be hungry, Let it be for ordinary things. Let him be as weak as I was, and don't let anyone talk him into thinking that's a failure. Please let my son be weak. Please let him be too weak to eat us. Please let him be too weak to climb.